Councillor Long.
Move we adopt the agenda as presented.
So we'll move right along to finance, as this is a special meeting of finance. 5A, operating budget.
Okay, so maybe hold off until any resolutions until after all the discussions are all over, then council can then make up their mind which way they want to go rather than do something and then have to amend, defeat, whatever. So I appreciate the fact we never got anything out to you till this afternoon. I didn't, pardon me?
First, we need a motion to get you going though, so. That council adopt 2016 operating maintenance budget utilizing the recommended wording of the resolution provided as provided, and it is recommended the council authorize a 1.4% increase to salaries and wages for cost of living, and that this increase be made retroactively to January 1st, 2016.
Go ahead, Herman.
Okay, and if it's just for the minutes, if we could record that as two separate resolutions, if that does go through, just makes it neater for our administration to follow through on. Anyways, so again, I should have broke it down, flip page over after the discussion. Anyways, so again, my apologies for not getting this out sooner, but I did not want to, we've looked at it an awful lot of times, and I didn't want to get it out there until Brian's had a chance to look at it. Today was his first day back. So once we got it back, then it was okay, let's go through it, see where we're at with it. I'm not sure if everybody's had a chance to read the RFD. It's quite self-explanatory. We have not changed a whole lot. There are certain items that have been changed, and there's certain things I wanted to point out. First off, the municipal tax revenues for residential and non-residential. What I faced in the budget is the exact amount that was captured last year. It was collected in taxes, so there would be no increase to the rate or to the number of dollars collected. The mill rate, I understand the assessments have gone up slightly, so the mill rate could possibly go down. The mill rate, as it relates to education, Heart River Housing, and the recreation, those rates are set by the amount of the requisition that we have to recover. We can't offset those through taxes. In the case of the education amount, last year, whoever calculated the mill rate for education, there was a shortcoming in the amount collected versus the requisitions. So when that happens, you then have to add that into the following year and collect it in the following year. It was originally figured to be about $111,000. I talked with the auditors, probably closer to $90,000 what will have to happen. But the amount of the expense and the revenue is going to be offset. What we're going to collect in the taxes is what we pay out, or we have to pay off the receivable from last year.
Herman, can you explain that again? Because
Okay.
we reduced the school mill rate?
What happens every year is you're advised by the school boards and the province what their requisition is going to be for the upcoming year. Administration then, based on the amount of assessment dollars that we know of, calculate a mill rate for just strictly education, and that gets applied to everybody's taxes. If that calculation goes wrong, which is what happened last year, you either end up collecting too much, if it's too high, or too little, is what it did last year. That amount then becomes a receivable for the following year's taxes and gets added on to the amount we have to collect for the requisition for the following year. So in other words, we'll be getting our requisition amount to recover for 2016 from the province and school boards, and then we'll also have to recover the under recovery from last year.
And how much was that?
Probably closer in the range of about $95,000.
It was under by 95?
We under collected $95,000 for what we had to pay out.
95,000.
So everybody got the break on last year's taxes, but
How can we not calculate that poorly?
again, I can't speak to that. If I don't know what assessment numbers he was using when he prepared the mill rate bylaw. I suspect he should have had probably the right number because the rest of the numbers seem to more or less fall in. So there's just a mistake.
How'd you find it?
Basically, you have to reconcile your revenues at the end of the year. So the money that comes in for the revenue goes into an account and you pay out, and then all of a sudden, we've paid out more than what we collected.
How did you pay out more? If you only collected a certain amount, why would you pay out more?
Because we are requisitioned from the province to pay our requisition for taxes. You have to do that under the Municipal Government
So
Act.
they gave you an amount,
Yes, and we would have had that amount prior to the
okay.
mill rate being set.
So when the calculation is done, it should equal that dollar amount.
That's right. There's usually a small adjustment for if you have people that go and do the assessment review board route and they talk with the assessor and have their assessments dropped. Obviously, if you set a mill rate based on your assessments of so many dollars, let's say $900 million. If after all your assessment review boards and the corrections by the auditor, if you drop $10 million out of your assessment, you're going to collect that much less in revenues. So you'd have to get that collect that the following year. That's usually what happens. In this case, it was just a miscalculation.
I'm just curious, what do we normally collect on behalf of the school board? How much do they ask us to collect?
Okay, it's collected on behalf of the province, actually, okay?
Okay.
So the school board gets their money back from, but it's provincial requisition, is the word I'm saying, and then they turn around and provide the budgets to the school
And
board.
it's normally 111,000? Oh,
Less than what's there, so.
29 and 30, okay.
So you'll see on there's a revenue side there, there's $508,000 on line 28, and $374,000 on line 29. So they total $874,000. The amount that would be paid out, the expenses was $880,000. So, let me get this right, $881,881. So they balance out with what comes in, what goes out. But part of what goes out, $111,000 in this budget, is towards the under recovery last year. Province always gets their money. Don't always pay it, but sorry. But no, they always get their money. They tell us what the requisition is, and we have to pay that. There's no way around that. But if we under collect, then we have to upfront it and then collect it back the following year. So, like I said, talking to the auditors, this $111,000 is probably closer to about $95,000. So that would be offset between the expenses and the revenues. So it'll be a wash in the final thing, the final outcome.
When they give you that amount, do they divvy it up between public and separate? Or is it just a lump sum?
It's a lump sum, and then it's divided out based on your, where people declare
Yeah.
their school board donations, yes. Because basically everybody pays the same amount for the school, the education portion on their taxes, regardless of where they're contributing.
Herman, were you able to tell if this was ongoing or if this is just this year?
No,
Because
the
this is
previous
sort of-
year was about a $3,000 adjustment that was required for it. Usually, and that's why I said normally you can expect a couple $1,000s in there.
Yeah, okay.
So it's just one, yeah.
Just a little glitch.
One of. I can't speak too high. There's no working papers there to go read it up on. And it's, you can go dig as much as you want, but for what purpose? It's basically we owe them the money, or we pay the money and we need to collect it, so.
That was all done before you were here.
That's correct.
No, I wasn't sure myself.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was, at the time that because this is the budget, when it comes time to write the mill rate, the mill bylaw up, then basically you'll have the actual numbers for the education, so the adjusted amount is $111,000 if it's corrected downwards. So the amount that we need to collect through the mill rate bylaw will then also be reduced. But as it sits right now, those are the dollars we'll need to collect on the mill rate bylaw for education. Any other questions in regards to that area? So what else? We did do a couple other things. We already authorized several transfers to capital reserves. We were ending it with a surplus at the end of the year. So what we added in here is the amount of $100,000 to go to capital reserve for roads. We have nothing in our budget anywhere for the roads, but roads is one of our more expensive items on our capital program. So it's to put that amount in there now to recognize we need to do something. That was an arbitrary number. It's just a way of, we just split up the money between that. When we get down to the bottom, you see where we did the rest to the rate stabilization reserve. But we put $100,000 to recognize we need to put money in there. The other thing I wanted to point out, contribution to the rec board in this budget remains at $568,145.50. That is the last word I had on the the resolution of council, so that's where it's at. Transfers to reserve, lines 670 and 71. So it's basically towards the end of this. Page 31. So there, throughout the budget, there's several lines, a lot of lines there with the transfers to reserves. Operating reserves, $94,678.82. And this includes an amount of $67,678.82 to rate stabilization reserve. And basically the reason for rate stabilization reserve is to cover off things in operating that are one-ofs and try and put money aside. So if we have a bad year next year for snow removal, or have to pay more for salt and sand, et cetera, for snow removal, that would be there. Other things that will be coming in the future is when council looked at, and we were presented with some of the capital building projects, or what was considered to be capital building. Those, in fact, a lot of those items are not capital items. Those are basically a maintenance item, similar to what we had to do with the Moose Tooth building. What's going on over there, this was budgeted for capital, doesn't meet the requirements of our tangible capital assets policy. So if you're doing maintenance, it's the maintenance budget. If you're adding square footage or adding life to years to the building, then it's a capital item. You know, it's something that you can then expand the usage or the life of the building. If it's just picking up, tearing out the carpet, replacing that, and putting paint on the walls, it's not really a capital item. So those items that were identified in that report will then have to come into our operating budget down the road when we start doing that work. So it's the reasoning to put some money aside into reserve. Otherwise, if you've got, let's say, $200,000 worth of work required in this building, let's say, tear up all the carpets, paint the whole thing, or put a new roof on it. A roof may be a little different, because if you're going to extend the life of the building by putting a roof on it, you can capitalize it. But those things that aren't then have to come out of the operating budget. So if all of a sudden you end up with a bunch of repairs that need to be done one year, your mill rate ends up with the spikes and valleys. This is to try and avoid that, so we can start putting money aside, try to even the pain out over the whole course of the coming forward. So this basically, as presented, without the amortization, is a balanced budget. Without any changes in there. If passed, there's nothing that says you would not be able to go back afterwards and amend the budget if there's something else found. What you would need to do, though, is if it's done between now and the time you set your mill rate, if something has to be added, if the council comes up with a decision that needs something that will affect this, either revenues will have to be found, or cuts to expenditure program somewhere else with, you have to work through administration at the time. Okay, what are we not going to do anymore? Then it's a tough one. Included in the budget, and I have had this in there for quite a few meetings where we've looked at the budget, is I have factored in the Statistics Canada cost of living increase for this area, 1.4%, so that is factored into this budget. Again, that's why I've put the resolution, though. We did want council to know that. So the documents that you had is the budget summary, the one that we've been looking at since back in October was our very first crack at it. The analysis of the utilities, it's still in there, the 2-pager, just to give some sort of how our utility are operating, revenues against expenditures in short, easy pages. And then the other thing is, and I know it's a wordy resolution that's similar to what we did with the interim budget. And I don't think it's necessary to read it out. It's just if the council agrees, it's as presented, or if there's a number that needs to be amended. But it is so much easier when the auditors are in here trying to figure out what was the budget that was passed, or for the next person that'll be coming in to fill in my chair. If you do it based on attachment to a council package, they can be lost, changed, disappeared, whereas this here, the wording gets in exactly how much is being spent on each program, where the revenue is coming from in each area. It's in the wording of the resolution in the minutes, so that can't be changed except for by an amendment to the resolution. So I think it's a good idea. It's just something I like to do as much as possible. So, having said all of that, questions?
And so this does include the fire chief's requests within this budget?
The fire, you're talking about the ATV side by side? That's in the capital budget. That's separate.
Yeah.
That'll be coming up next.
So that this is there, that's in there,
This is not in there. This is in the capital
capital.
budget. Okay.
which is good, okay? That part is good for me then. And then back to this one.
I did want to point out that land inventory sales, we did put $1 in there for a holder. We haven't had a lot of land inventory sales, but I did want to put $1 in there. That,
The airport?
I think that's what the note says. But we had budgeted in the past, I think last year was $150,000 is what we budgeted. We received nothing, so being optimistic and putting large amounts in there saying we're going to have land sales, unless you've actually got some deals pending, it's not fair to put it in there because what you're doing then is putting pressure on administration and the council at the end of the year to try and come up with that money. If we don't achieve the revenues, you got to try and come up with savings somewhere.
Page 29, the very bottom, it says motion 63/15. The request to forward the Peace Library Systems increase by 5%. Is that included in this budget or is that a discussion item?
No, that's included, as I did have a council resolution in there, and actually those amounts, they're on line 607. They have been in there since October.
So that 5% is an increase from the 14,500?
That's correct.
Okay,
This is the amount that they're actually billing us.
yep.
Actually, the 14,000 that was in there last year, the actual amount that they charged us was 14,300, so. Any other questions?
Yeah, perhaps you can, I'm just looking at the year-to-date actuals. I'm on page 7 for the revenues. And I'm looking at the totals for operating revenues, where it says that, the year-to-date actual was 7.4 million, and then we budgeted 8.6. I'm just wondering why there's,
Natural gas was the
Oh.
biggest.
on page 7.
Yeah. Yeah, right on page 7. That's correct. We discussed this before, where natural gas prices, the cost per gigajoule, and then what we charge out per gigajoule was considerably lower in this past year. And so it's a reduced revenues, but if you go down to the natural gas expenditures, also for the natural gas purchased, it was also down comparative numbers. So it's just when they did the budget up for 2015, at that time gas was at a higher amount. We didn't foresee, nobody could foresee where it's going. It's gotten as low as it has. I can remember the last time I was here, we were getting subsidies on our natural gas because anything that was over 5.25 gigajoules, the province was subsidizing, paying that in. Now we pay less than $2 a gigajoule on our natural gas. So where it's going to go this year, it's the same as the oil prices. If I knew where it was going, I could invest wisely and be retired maybe by 70.
And just looking ahead at the expenses, again, it's been such a long time since I've looked at some of these, so you might have to refresh my memories again. But at the year-to-date says that last year, in 2015, we spent basically $9 million. And for 2016, I'm on page 31,
Yeah.
sorry. I'll let you find it there.
Right, I'm here.
Okay, so it's saying that we spent 9 million, we budgeted 9.8, but this year we're budgeting 10.2.
Yeah, that's
So,
correct. The increases there?
yeah.
We were, as we said before, not putting money aside for our reserves. This year we went ahead, especially with the case of water, so we're putting 60% of our amortization into those reserves for capital. So at the bottom there is, $930,000, $935,000 that is now going into reserves, basically, which we weren't doing before. So we weren't planning that well. What was happening is, and as we've gone through this before, is at the end of the year, lo and behold, the auditors come in there and we have a great big surplus, and then we transfer that over to reserves. This year, it's better that if we can plan that, rather than just try to, I'm trying to use the right words without saying, inflate the budget so we can end up having a surplus at the end of the year, so the money to put it into reserves. It's not a good way to do it. It's better to be factual in what we put in our estimates, and then put that money into the reserves through the budget process.
Is that just that 100,000?
Pardon me?
How much are we?
Putting into reserves? That's the line two, on that same page 31, line 670 and 671, the two last lines. Total of $935,000 is going into reserves. Any other questions?
Page 7 again, on revenue. The business licenses, line 82.
Correct?
Why such a drop when you actually did get 8,775?
If it serves me correct, some of the money that was being recognized as business license revenue was not in fact from business licenses, and those revenues have been transferred upwards. I haven't changed, there's a reasoning for it. We did an analysis on the revenues, we did the first thing on this budget.
Well, you must have more than 25 businesses in town that are being charged business licenses.
$50 a pop,
Exactly. So 25 times 50 is 1,200.
1,200.
So that's only 25 businesses. There's got to be more than 25 businesses in town. I don't mind
Yeah.
being just 1,200 there.
Yeah,
but
no.
I think
And
that
the thing is if we get actual numbers higher than that will then lead towards the reserve. I have no idea how the $1,200 got in there.
Okay.
Nobody brought that up before, so.
That's why we have these meetings.
How much is in the side-by-side, the fire chief's
That's in the
account?
capital budget coming up. It's not in here.
Okay. So I'm seeing in here, vehicle accidents, line 93. 35,000 for the budget. That goes into that capital budget, doesn't it?
That's correct. As per our policy and as per the bylaw, the fire bylaw, that any money collected for traffic accidents is to go into the reserve. That's right in the bylaw. There's no choice. So whatever we get in revenue, you'll find that it's an expense if you look in the fire department as a contribution to their reserve.
What page will it be on?
Quickly go to that. Disaster services. Check the above disaster. Fire department, line 271 on page 14. And it is $35,000 as an expenditure in there.
Okay.
Just wanted to clarify again, so in that same line on the 93 on page 7 for that Vehicle accidents, there, it's showing, year-to-date was 67,315. We had budgeted 30,000, so we had a difference of 37,000 there. And we're budgeting 35,000 this year, if it was 67 last year.
We're bringing the budget up from the previous year. It's one of these lines where it doesn't, if we do collect again more, then there's more money going to be in the reserve. So it'll be offset by an increased expenditure. So if we collect, let's say 65,000 on here, we won't get an extra 30 or $28,000 in revenues to spend, because that money then will automatically be transferred into the capital reserve.
So what you're saying is basically an
It's
in
a
and
wash.
an out.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct.
But if they're getting, 2014 was 50 and the next year was 67, and I suspect that this year will be more, it just, for me, why aren't we budgeting with closer numbers? I understand it's gonna end up as a wash, but, yeah, I mean,
There
from
have been
Kent
other
to
years
plan,
previous
it's a
to
little bit
where,
less.
last year was a very busy year.
Yeah.
Where we were very aggressive in getting the bills out. But if you look back into previous years on that, let me go back to page 7, sorry.
Yeah, it was 50,000 in 2014. And 36 back in 13, but I
Yeah.
think in the last 2 years, it's showing it's gonna be higher. But I know what you're going.
Yeah.
It just seems like,
With
I don't know what
revenues,
Ken's
yeah.
using to plan, right?
Pardon me?
I'm wondering what Ken is using to
Yeah.
plan
When
for
we
that.
go to look at the capital plan, you'll see that the reserve that's there for the fire department right now, there's plenty of money there for it. There's in excess of $200,000 in that reserve. So unless we were looking at spending $500,000 in a fire truck right now, and we're really scratching to get that extra money in there, I think it's, I want to use the word the auditor used, because they always say it's insignificant. It doesn't match, at the bottom line, it's still a balanced budget.
Yeah,
The
I
revenue
get
and
that. It
expense
just
are gonna
seems
offset.
like it's
Yeah.
odd that we're not using more realistic numbers from the last 2 years. That's,
Just as, and we'll talk about this in the capital, but it's something that we should be talking to.
Something we should be talking to the county about, because at what point do you say you have enough in that reserves?
If you look at a brand new fire truck at $500,000, you're never going to have enough money in the reserves. I hate to say it, for the fire department is on the capital side, a lot of expensive equipment. The rescue vehicles that we have in here, you're talking in excess of $100,000.
Okay.
So having $300,000, it could be if something happened where we had to replace a fire truck, and I'm not sure where that is in our program going outwards.
Oh,
So
okay.
there would be a reason, so we should probably have a plan put together to say, okay, here's what the plans are, so where the money's coming from. I'm cheap, I always buy the ones that are display at the shows. Yeah,
Another question, in the 1.4% COLA adjustment, what's the total cost to our budget for that?
okay. Should ask. There. Okay. So I'm sure you can see the numbers from there. My eyesight's a little worse because it's far off. The salary portion, $6,700 and change. This here portion is the hourly rate employees, you help me out, Brian, 29,970? Yeah, that's so for a total of that on the salaries, $35,737. The benefits, which is just basically increases to some of it's based on the salaries, but very minimal based on the amount of salaries that's actually been increased in the budget. So most of that is increased rates for WCB, your other insurance benefits, EI is 43,000. So the total for increases on the salary side, wages and salaries and benefits is 79,500, with 43,770 of that coming in benefits alone. So the 1.4%, it points to this year number here.
Can you explain how the benefits are more than the costs? That doesn't make sense to me.
So you're saying the
There's-
increase to the benefits is more than
There's
the
increase to benefits costs, especially WCB is a good one, but it's based on our total salary package. Let's say in WCB, the amount extra that we're paying in salaries based on the 1.4% is only 35,000. But the extra that we're paying on the WCB, you know, even at a couple percent based on our total salary dollars, which is the $1.8 million. So a couple of percentage points on that doesn't take very long to add up. And it's more than just that, it's also your EI, your CPP, your health benefits.
That just seems outrageous. What's
Benefits?
There's something not right there. Because, I mean, how can the benefits be more than the wages, the increase in benefits and and those expenses? That just doesn't fit for me.
If we had a 0% salary increase, salaries would remain exactly the same as,
Yeah,
the benefits would still be going up.
okay.
Because that's dictated to us what we have to pay for our benefits. You know, we have, WCB, they dictate the rates for us, our employees, that we have to pay out.
And you're saying our WCB rates are going up?
Yes, they went up for the 1st of January.
Okay.
Now that's in the benefit area, but it's not really
It's not,
benefit per person. It's
but it is
Yeah,
if something
cost
happens and you
part.
get hurt or whatever,
Right,
it's
no,
considered, yeah,
yeah.
from this point of view, it's
it's
listed
not
there.
part of the benefit program.
Yeah.
It's an
Yeah.
overall work.
Well, it's the same as employment insurance, CPP, those are all mandatory.
But you're saying your health benefits are in there as well,
As
and they're
well.
actually a benefit because they're not mandatory, right? That's a choice we have to offer
Yeah,
the health
but
benefits.
all of those things are considered as benefits costs.
And that,
All
So-
lumped together.
Yes, and that 1.8 million.
so the $36,000 increase includes your AUMA health package increases
Nope.
as well?
36 over here above here on this side, that is strictly the 1.4% salary package increases.
So
So,
it's the 43.
pardon me?
So
So what number is the increase?
43 on the AUMA, CPP, EI, WCB. Those all total a total of 43,770.
now you mentioned WCB over and over again. Is that biggest increase at WCB?
It's the biggest one this year.
Wow.
Yeah. We get rated based on an industry, and we're put in municipalities, and so it's experience-based, but I think a lot of the places, the last few years, WCB has been crawling up higher and higher.
Does it include emergency service people?
Yes. Yeah, there's an amount that goes in for the fire department. And of course, the more firefighters you have, then you're also paying more out, even though we've always budgeted for the full commitment of firefighters, and that includes we've been budgeting for their WCB. We haven't necessarily paid it because what you pay then is based on what you actually put out in your salary package.
So then the actual 1.4% COLA increase is only an increase to the budget of $36,000?
That's correct.
Are you saying that the increase in the benefits would be 43,000 regardless of whether there was a 1% increase or not?
That 1.4% increase would have just a small portion on that. As a matter of fact, some of those benefits, if you're talking about EI and CPP, a lot of the employees are going to be at close to maximum contributions anyways. So if they're already above the maximum contribution, there's no additional amount that you pay out for them, except for whatever rate increase you get on EI and CPP.
So what would that benefits line be if there was a 0% increase?
I can't tell right. I don't have that number right now. Oh, just a minute. Hold on. Am I truthful on that? I don't want to get to this part of the spreadsheet without. Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. Maybe I can do this. There. I'm going to put this at 0. I'm going to go back to the original sheet, so without an increase at all. For only 41,000. Salaries would be increasing anyways, 10,367,000 or $367. That being for salary grid increases. So the original number that was up there, I believe, was 37,000?
Yeah,
35,000, so basically the 1.4% actually equates to $25,000 of that. Salary grid increases equates to 10,300.
That was the same line item, that was, but you just decreased.
Yeah, salaries.
That 6, 7, we don't have that on here though, right?
No, you don't. This is just numbers that I have in order to be able to answer. It's for calculation purposes.
Yeah, so altogether, it's about a $30,000 hit then, because with the 1.4, it was about 80,000 with the 2, with the wage amounts, and
Yeah.
then this was 50, so it's about a $30,000 difference?
I believe so. We can take this number here.
That's,
Let me just copy.
yeah, 51, or say 51,
Get the actual
52.
numbers. Space special. I'll use, I hope I can read that right. Okay, let me go back to.
And it's 80, yeah.
27,009, so basically $28,000
Yeah.
for the 1.4% increase. Any other questions on that?
How did we get to be, this one here, last time, was only 20,
Which one? Sorry.
this line.
no, it was, no,
But when he took the 1.4.
it went to 10,000.
It went to
Down to
10,000
10.
for the step increases.
25.
25 and $2,000 here.
Oh,
Yeah, so.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
40, 41. So difference roughly of 2,000 is all it made.
Two and change.
Yeah,
Yeah.
on that change.
So are we likely to see that like $80,000 a year increases basically on salary and wages, whether we combine it with benefits and
What you'll be
whatever?
looking at is the salary and wages, the increase on salary and wages without the benefits is 35,000. 25 of that, am I correct? Yeah, 25,000 of that is based on a 1.4%. So you'd be looking at 10%, $10,000, $11,000 increase anyways every year because of the salary grid increases. This 35,000 here at a 0% went down to almost $11,000. That's because of the salary grid increases.
So each year we'll be looking at about an $80,000 if benefits increase like they did this year,
Mhm.
and if we pay a salary grid increase every year,
And depending on what the cost of living increases are,
so it's likely for it to be regularly $80,000, more or less. It could be.
yeah, it depends what inflation does. Yeah, 1.4, it's been pretty steady at that the last few years. It has been low, 1%, 1.5 on average. I think the biggest I've seen in the last 4 or 5 years, maybe 2%. But that's not to say, the economy being what it is, if all of a sudden something happens, gasoline goes back up, right now we're probably at a low number because we're not $140 oil anymore. We're down to $25, $30 oil when our gas prices, I know it's just now down to 82 cents or 80 cents, some cents again down. So that's bringing cost of living down. If gasoline was back up at $1.29 a liter, we'd probably be looking at a lot higher than a 1.4% increase. Anybody who buys groceries knows when they go to the produce department or meat department what's happened in the last 3 years. It's gone up drastically. Just everything else. Cost of shipping goods up here now because the American dollar again. Anything we're bringing out of the country.
Mayor Cox?
Last year, we talked about there were 2 entities that gave different amounts for cost of living. The county was using a different.
We're using StatsCan,
What were-
Statistics Canada,
What were the
for
counties
Northern Alberta.
using?
I don't know what they were using. But the standard used for any place I've been at and anybody I've talked to is Statistics Canada. And they do come up with a separate number for Northern Alberta.
Because the counties was a different number and it was lower. And it was also a cost of living.
Counselor Courtney.
So the 1.4%, is that, let me get that right, it's over and above the regular, increase of wages
For salary grids?
for salary grade?
If the person is, if the person's not at the top of a salary grid already, because we do have employees that are at the top of their salary grid, so
Right,
there's no
right.
increase for them at all except for this.
Okay.
Okay, so that's above what the position, you have a position that's, let's say, salary grid of $40,000 to $50,000. We'll start at 40,000, let's say it goes to 42, 44, 46. Those are based on the salary for the position.
And that grid has an increase built in already, correct?
It has, I guess what it'd be for encouraging the employee to stay with the employer.
But there's timelines and there's.
Yes.
I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, no, it's every 12 months based on a satisfactory person review of his performance. So if there's the performance isn't up to snuff, if it hasn't met the expectations of the supervisor, then there's no recommendation for increase in the salary grid. And that does happen from time to time.
Just to dig in on that a little bit, how many employees did not, or do not qualify for a step this year? Because I know when we did the pay adjustment, we adjusted a lot of the grids and everybody has been moving up. Even if they were long-term employees, they sort of were able to keep moving up. But
Mhm.
have we had anybody that's at the max now?
I believe there's a couple, yes.
There might be somebody, yeah?
I don't have the number right here in front of me, sorry.
Okay, because I thought everybody was still getting step increases.
But
You're at the top.
I'm actually a bottom feeder.
Yes.
Well, he was getting a step for a little bit there, he said.
Yeah,
So I
no,
don't know
I'm-
if he's maxed
Yeah.
out again or not.
Basically, if I remember correctly, it happened with the salary grid adjustments that were happening here. The scale wasn't there, and it was based on where the employee was being paid, so it doesn't necessarily mean the employee had a whole shift to jump. He may have been at the top of the grid before, which put him at a step 6 out of 8 or whatever on the new grid.
That's what I mean, there
Yeah.
was steps for everybody
exactly.
for a few
That's what
years
happens
there.
when you've been here 30 years.
I just, off the cuff, I don't know, just with the economy the way it is and with everything going on, I just, my personal feeling, what we do in our industry, we're cutting back, we're cutting wages steady. We cut our wages 10% cut. So to increase another 1.4 when they have already a step program in place right now, physically, that's my opinion, right? I don't feel comfortable with that 1.4, but maybe not time to discuss that, or is it? I don't know.
This is the time.
It is. That's how I feel.
Can I ask you a question about sustainability at that rate?
Mhm.
Because I know we were the council that put in place the new wage grid, or the increased wage grid. That was a couple of years back. That was brought to our attention that we were paying less than industry sort of standard, and that's
Yep.
one thing to consider when we're we're considering.
We're trying to recruit or to
There's
retain.
there's some industries that have had to cut back their wages, but we've always been a lower paying I guess industry, but I mean, as an employer, we haven't paid those top wages, right?
For the municipalities.
For all municipalities,
Yes.
but our municipality was lower than many of them a few years ago, and now we're at
On
a
par,
level
but
50,
again, some of
70.
those other municipalities have now, they've also gone up. You know,
Yeah, and we found that maybe we're at least hitting
We're
the
still-
average, or maybe above the average at that point.
yeah, I
in
can't
time when
speak
we
for
increased.
Brian, but I'm not sure about, try to recruit and retain employees or whatever, and where we're at with
Right.
that,
And we were struggling with employee retention, but as I am finding out now that I hear that we had a number of applications for any job that's available all of a sudden since the job market has sort of changed. So things are definitely
Yeah.
changing.
Certain
But I'm
trades,
curious
yes.
as to whether or not we can be sustainable at $80,000 a year, because that's what we're faced with. The 1.4 is a small amount of that 80,000, but the rest of that there's not much we can do about the grid
yeah.
increases.
Oh,
or
that's right, the 80,000, if you're
benefits,
talking
right?
about that, what you're basically talking though is the 27,000.
Right,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying, we have to recognize that
Yep.
we're faced with that 80,000 annually.
Yeah, you're gonna be faced with that $52,000 irregardless. Unless everybody else comes up to the top of their grids and, it stays on. But, in answer to when you say there's lots of people applying, I know for one position they're not. The talent pool is fairly shallow. And if you look at the AU base site and that, on municipal employees, especially at the higher end, there are, again, positions opening up. You know, we've got that right now in the county with the CAO, Costu retiring, and they're looking for it. Saddle Hills is now looking for a CAO. Town of Rimbey, there's probably about 8 or 9 CAO positions vacant right now just in Alberta. Another 5 or 6 in the NWT. BC is going through a cycle again. The thing is with CAOs and the senior administrative staff is a lot of us are the, what were we called? Baby boomers. And we're on the way out. And it's getting, you know, so as people are retiring or moving, you know, all it takes is one position to go vacant, and we end up with a domino effect. A position like Mr. Costu, which pays considerably more than most CAOs make, the next person coming in there would then be a bump up, and a bump up for somebody else, and a bump up somewhere else. So eventually, you probably end up, that'll cause about 6 position changes, quite possibly. So if you're talking about people that are, you know, driving a gravel truck, yeah, there's more of the people there available looking for those type of jobs. But a lot of municipal employees, another example is our water treatment plant operators. Having come from a municipality where we train water treatment plant operators and then watch them once they're trained walk out the door, just go to a community that pays and offers, and they recruit viciously for water treatment plant operators. And so some trades go, you know, are pretty good, but there's other ones need to be competitive with to try and get them and retain them.
Do we feel like our wages are competitive now?
I don't speak to the employees as much as what Brian would and Vern, because they speak to what their people are. I know the girls in the office are happy, but I do know that certain of the people, let's say from Public Works, do come in. And careful how I phrase this. If we had a union, they'd probably be the shop stewards. But they do talk that, you know, yeah, we should be getting something, or, you know, down the road is looking rosier, but some of that, you hear that talk anyways. It's not necessarily always truthful. You know, I'll grumble about my wages to my boss sometimes. Okay. Any other questions?
Okay, the economic development.
Rooms, public utilities, property development, community services, development.
Or you could go to whatever and go right from there.
If we're talking development, I'd have to say that's on page 28. So that one seems to be mostly for Moose Toos.
Are you sure?
Oh, pardon me. Page 27, line 553 is the total economic development amount that's in there.
27 is property development. I think you're right.
Yeah, but go up the page, go up a few lines, you'll see line 553 says economic development,
Okay.
$6,000. Same as last year's.
Okay, so the position that used to be there is long gone.
Yes.
There used to be, I don't know, a couple of $100,000 in there. It's called.
I remember that.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so going back to the motion that was made regarding this whole budget. And that motion was that the 2015 budget, the 2016 total operating expenses budget would equal the 2015 budget.
Mhm.
So there's a $342,000 increase here.
And council has put those increases forward to administration. The transfers to reserves. So the only thing we then went on was based on the tax revenue to be collected is the same in 2016 as in 2015.
So if we want this budget to remain the same, the expenses, the operating expenses, to remain the same in 2015 as in 2016, we would then have to reduce the transfers to reserves.
That's correct. At least those.
That would be one place to
That's correct.
equal it.
Yeah,
The other place to equal it is to reduce services.
exactly.
Okay. What is the impact of reducing the transfers to reserves?
It's your capital program going forward. You have no capital. You gutted it already with what was going on before. When you cleared those accounts out, we set those money back in there and set up a program of putting the money back into reserves so that you'll be able to have some sustainability going forward for your water programs, your sewer programs, those capital items, the roads, the equipment, vehicles. So without any money going into those reserves, 2 years, 3 years down the road, there is no money there to do anything. If we have money that we require from matching government grants, there'll be nothing there.
So you have a capital, reserve of 841.
Going in this year, capital reserve, that's correct.
If you remove the 342, you would still have 500,000 going forward into your capital reserves.
But some of those money for the reserves, we've now collected extra money in our sewer revenues, our gas revenues. Council has passed those resolutions already to raise the rates through the utilities to cover off some of those. So it would require having to rework the whole budget to see which ones you're going to cut. So that would require some note-taking for somebody to work on after this meeting.
But it's possible.
It's possible, but whether you're going to have a budget here before your mill rate bylaw is required. And I'm not trying to, put the pressure on, but, mill rate bylaw has to be in by the end of May. It requires somebody to be able to make those adjustments to the budget.
I'm thinking that it's a lot easier than what you're saying. It sounds to me like.
Yeah, well, that's fine, and Brian can do that, because
No.
my next 3 days are here with the auditors, so, I'm sorry.
All right, so
Madam Mayor.
that's an
Yeah.
option.
Yes, it
Reduce
is.
the capital
Yeah.
reserves by 340,000, which would give us back to what the intent of that motion was of council, that the 2015 budget expenditures equal the 2016 expenditure budget.
Other than we have increased some expenditures through the budget based on just things we've done. MMSA has increased the budget this year. The libraries, some of the other areas where we've done it, where we've known our utility expenses, our insurance costs are based on our actual insurance voices we were getting. So those increased. You can't say that we're going to budget less because we
But
don't.
we would also expect to see some decreases in the fact that we have some vacant positions here that are being budgeted for,
Yeah.
and we're holding them open, but we have placed money for those positions if we decide to, if the CAO decides to
That was,
hire.
yes.
That's in here. There's also the fact that in the capital budget, we expect to see, and province-wide, we expect to see decreases in contracts, substantial decreases. So at least we're being told that.
Mhm.
We're also being told that there is going to be some grant money available. Perhaps some of the capital projects will be covered more with grants. So for $350,000, I'm really not sure whether or not we're prepared to put that much money in the budget, or are we ready to say, no, this is what we asked for and this is what we want.
With the exception of the two items that I brought up tonight in the reserves, the capital reserve for road, which is, as stated, needs to happen, and this rate stabilization reserve. Those other reserves have all been talked with council and everybody at the table and said, yes, we need to do this, and yes, we need to raise revenue for it in some cases, or we need to put it in the budget. So those are done. So with the exception of $174,000.
I agree totally
Yeah.
with what you're saying, and I know, I sat here and voted for
Mhm.
many of those.
Yeah.
But when it actually comes now down to looking at $342,000, I'm not so
Yeah.
sure.
But
I'm
if you look at,
agreeing anymore.
yeah, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, but if you're looking at what you're talking about getting from the taxpayers as far as tax revenues, you're not increasing anything. You're looking at the same dollars this year as you got from them last year for
But we
municipal
have
taxes.
raised their utility rates,
Yes, we have.
that's right. And we have had good reason to raise the utility
Yep.
rates. And it was a fair raise as far
Mhm.
as we're concerned in looking at the long scheme of things. But also, I don't think that we should also be saying, well, we're going to dip in here and here and here and perhaps, and
I don't think anybody's dipping into anything,
well,
I'm sorry.
bad words, and I agree.
Yeah.
I'm sorry
Yeah,
that
yeah, that's
I
fine.
phrased it that way. I'm very hesitant to see some of these, to see this increase at this point. Although we haven't set the mill rate, I'm still hesitant to see the expenditures increased. That's just my thoughts.
Yeah, but we have not, if the mill rate was to be written today based on this budget, there'd be no increase to the taxes, the mill rate amount.
There probably would not be an increase to the mill rate amount because we're already kind of hearing, aren't we, that the assessment might have gone
No,
up.
Based on an assessment value of exactly the same last year, and this budget, the mill rate would remain exactly the same as last year for municipal taxes. If the assessment value goes up, the mill rate will go down.
So are you telling me then, as we did last year on our example, the $100,000 amount for your taxes will be exactly the same as the bill this year as it was for last year? If I had a house that was assessed at $100,000, I will receive the same municipal tax bill as last year,
That's correct.
based on this amount.
Because if you go back to the amount that we looked at beginning in the revenues,
Mhm.
the two lines for municipal taxes for residential and non-residential are exactly the amounts that were collected last year. So there's no change to that.
So where are you getting your extra? Are you?
We've done some changes to the revenues with the utility rates.
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh, but the utility rates are a separate item from the revenue of your property taxes.
That's
shouldn't
correct.
be
It's a separate
using-
amount, but so are the utility expenses.
But it does go to expenses though, as well, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's just other revenue generated.
it should be going straight to amortization, most of it.
I haven't even discussed it.
No. With what goes to the reserve is 60% of the amortization cost for water and sewer. Those are two examples. And that was set in the policies that we set for reserves. Council passed the reserve policies.
Okay, then if that's what you're saying, that I'm not going to see an increase in my taxes from the municipal section only
Mm-hmm.
with this budget.
With this budget, we are telling administration, or council is telling administration, that they have the authority to collect in taxes the amounts listed under lines 19 and 20. And those amounts are exactly the same amounts that were actually collected under column H on those lines in 2015. That's correct.
Other than the school board.
School, Hard River Housing, Recreation, they're completely different fish.
And if we choose to leave the mill rate the same, we could see tax increases.
Tax revenue increases. Yeah, the mill rate was to remain the same. If your assessment goes up, yes. But if everybody's assessment goes up, to collect this revenue, the mill rate would come down.
Councillor Gilroy.
Just a point of clarification, since I wasn't here when you did your
Yep.
deliberations. In section L for 25 and 26, what are those numbers?
Okay, sorry. Oh! For 25 and 26?
$2 million and 2.6 is kind of significant. What are they for?
What are you looking at, Brian? Sorry.
Oh, sorry, page 5 still.
Page 5.
Yeah.
Number 25 and number 26.
Oh, okay.
Section L has,
So those like TV transmission lines.
Yeah, there's a different reason for those numbers. numbers to
plans
be there.
that were part of the 2017 budget
No.
process.
No, they're numbers that are there for older, line 25. Let's go over to see where they're being used.
2017.
Those two.
Some, the 19 to 25. G being the 2014 actual. Okay, total tax revenues this year relates to column G, which will be 214 actuals. This relates to column H, 2015 actuals. So the actual revenue raised for taxes in those years, 2014, 2015. So it's nothing that's being used anywhere in the calculation. This is just for my own information to get to say, what is the tax totals for 2014? What are the tax totals for 2015?
Thank you, I was thinking.
Okay, there's
it might have been
nothing-
something to worry about for next year.
No, there's that, no. Yeah, if you want, I can take that out of there. But you need to look at the formulas, and that's what that is. You can do comparative numbers.
Anybody have any other questions?
If I see the assessment go up,
You hunt me down, dirty dog I am, well, first conference we meet. No, sorry.
the assessment does go up, and we
Yes.
lower the mill rate,
Be a happy person.
then I will see less municipal taxes on their bills.
That's correct. If their personal assessment went down, or pardon me,
The overall
if
assessment of the
everybody's
town-
assessment goes up by the same amount, the amount of taxes that still needs to be collected will be the same amount. So you'll still pay the same amount in taxes, you'll just pay it at a lower mill rate.
All right, if the total assessment of the town goes up,
Yes?
because we have had buildings
Added onto the
added on,
inventory.
so that means that the total revenue that's collected will go up.
No. What's on the numbers that are up there? The revenue that we're collecting is based on what's in this budget saying that we're gonna collect for revenues. If the assessment goes up, the mill rate goes down, the amount of money collected will still be the same.
So are we saying
So
that?
somebody who did not have an assessment going up would in fact probably receive less, a smaller tax bill. If your assessment is exactly the same, if the overall assessments have gone up, the mill rate will go down, your taxes will go down if it's the same,
Okay,
all right?
because the idea is to get this amount of money only
In taxes.
in
yes.
taxes.
That's hopefully being taped right now, so you can go
Yeah,
back to that.
okay.
But that's,
Because that's all we wanna collect,
Yeah.
is this amount in taxes.
Mhm.
We're not interested in collecting more,
according to this budget, no.
okay?
I'm sure Brian's made note of that. We know where that'll go the next time when the mill rate bylaw comes forward, but no, that's the intent here. This is the revenue. There's a spot in the mill rate bylaw that says revenues to be collected, in the totals. You'll be able to go, hopefully there. I'm not gonna be writing the bylaw, but whoever does will write it in such a fashion to be able to go there for the taxes collected, for municipal taxes. The two amounts there for residential and non-residential will total the same as these two numbers here total. That's the way it should be prepared.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I think we gotta be clear that what we're losing and saving in here, if we look at where some of this money is coming from, is in the past, we had a lot more reserve money left over in the past, and we're not going to have as much extra left over. We are allocating upfront for some of that amortization, so some of it's being put away. But those increases are coming out of what we used to have being put away. So those additional funds were built into the budgets. They were just basically rolled over into a surplus. And now that total amount is decreasing by the, like you're saying, well, that 300,000, it's going down. So eventually those numbers are going down. We have to be aware of that.
And, it's not that we're saying that there won't be a surplus at the end of 2016. through prudent management, the fact that you alluded that there's some positions right now that have not been staffed, may not be staffed for a while yet. I'm not sure, there's some vacancies that'll occur that may not get staffed right away. But anyways, there's gonna be savings from those. The managers in the different departments, they do work very hard to try and get the best bang for the buck. If you talk to Vern sometimes, I think Councillor Gilroy was talking to him, he grinds down some salesmen pretty good. So we don't try to spend any more money than we have to. We try to look after the taxpayers' money and spend it as wisely as possible. But like you said, we're not coming up with a surprise surplus at the end of the year and saying, oh wow, we got money, we're gonna put it in reserves. We're actually planning to put money in reserves, and that's part of the prudent, leadership, and that is to take the money and put it aside so we are sustainable. If we just say we're gonna hopefully have a surplus next year, we'll put that in reserve. If it doesn't transpire, where are you gonna do your capital program from?
Councillor Gilroy.
Not to press a red button here, but how did we deal with the potential not having any more guild money in our budget?
We didn't get it in last year's budget in the revenues for taxes, so it's not there this year for revenues. So if somebody changes their mind, it'll be a bonus.
So to pay for all the employees' benefits?
The one other thing in here that council will need to look at, and this is where I expect that there may have to be a revision come back to council if council has to decide on something. The MSI operating grant is in here at the same amount as last year. I don't know what the problem is. I have not heard that they are looking at MSI. I think they're getting beat up bad enough on taxes in lieu of, but so for the smaller municipalities, it's important. The cities, it's even more important because they get the lion's share of it, of course. But we'll have to wait and see until April 14th. But if that does transpire, council needs to be aware that they may need to make adjustments to the $88,000. The other option may be then to take a look at those positions that are vacant and say, you know what, we could swallow that. We just won't end up with, this will be up to Brian and you guys to decide.
Is MSI only 88,000?
88,000 in the operating side. In the capital, when we get to that on the next step, we can talk about that one. But just as a heads up, when we get to capital, the MSI money for 2016, we haven't budgeted to spend all of that. But we have got some money in deferred MSI that we haven't spent in the last few years. We're going to spend it before they take it back.
Any other questions? Come on.
Read back the motion.
How about I put it up on the screen and council can read the motion?
First of the two motions.
We're going to do it as two motions?
Yes, it would be helpful. So, this would be the wording. You can either read it and say you agree with it, or somebody can read it out, but as long as it goes with, these are the numbers that are in the budget.
That's not the motion on the table.
The first motion was for the wording provided. This is the wording that's provided in the package.
I thought we were reading the motion on page 4. Recommended action. No? That's what you read. That's what Michael read.
Yep.
Yeah, so what Michael read was the bottom of page
Council
4.
adopt the
right?
2016 operating maintenance budget utilizing the recommended wording of a resolution as provided.
Oh, there you go, yeah.
So there's the wording as
There's the
provided, which is on the
recommended
screen in front of you.
Ah, got it.
And this, again, I like to put the numbers out in there exactly as the numbers are, so that if somebody needs to, as the auditors go back and confirm that's what council approved in the budget, those numbers are there, it's easy to validate.
Councillor Panasic.
I think we're almost, like, we've got the two motions, one to do a COLA increase, and the COLA increase has already been adopted into this budget.
Yes.
So I think if we approve the one budget, we're almost de facto approving the COLA increase.
Or you'll inflate the budget and have some extra money available if you decide not to vote the COLA. You could possibly do the COLA first if you want to go that route.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was just wondering, because in some way, shape, or form, where if we don't approve the COLA, then we're
You'll end up
dropping
with a
the
surplus.
budget by
You'll end up with a surplus.
a surplus, or we could reduce the budget.
What I would suggest is if the amount that's been reduced in expenses, that amount that I said to take the last of the surplus over and put it into the rate stabilization reserve, that money then would be increased to cover off the difference, so there'll still be a balanced budget.
Okay.
So there'll be no adjustments to revenues. The only place that would be adjusted would be the rate stabilization reserve amount.
I would like two separate motions.
Okay. Yeah, and that's what thought we were going with, was this motion and the
And did
pay
you want
increase. Do you want to do
the,
the pay increase one first then?
did you want the COLA motion first?
Where would I be finding grants like the sesquicentennial funding? Where do we have that?
That was already funded, $150,000 was funded up in 2015. But let me just go grants to organizations. Oh, pardon me, I think it was 25,000 left to go this year. No,
Wasn't it $50,000?
50. And I think that's fully funded.
Yeah.
150,000 this year, 2015.
Was there not a contribution for 2016 as well?
And 17.
Yeah, it's supposed to be every year.
And that money was all taken out in 1 year.
Oh,
You what?
they took it all out in 1 year.
How much?
150,000.
100,000?
150.
That should only been 100.
But it was
25.
25,000 each year.
Yeah, but only for 4 years.
Yeah.
We may want to find that resolution. We thought it was $25,000 a year for 4 years.
I'll take
And
that.
if we've got 150 in
Yeah,
there
the
already.
$50,000 a year was for the
Rec board.
rec board. 25,000, and the $25,000 is in here. Transfers to operating reserve. Let's go up to it. It's a $96,000 value. Line 163. Transfer to operating reserve. So that's on page 9. Includes $25,000 for the Sesquicentennial, and the remainder of that is for the rate stabilization reserve. And there is the motion, resolution 10315, $25,000, 2014-17.
Okay.
Yeah, so that is in there, it's included in that line.
Geez, we thought we were richer than we were. Oh well, it's the way it was
I
supposed
think
to
it's
be.
a capital one where we got the money ahead of time, but we're ahead of schedule on putting money in there.
Okay, Michael, your motions are on the table.
You wanna do the salary one first?
So, we go back to do that, yeah. I just got the motions there.
That's on page 4. Oh, if you read the one, page 4 for the salary one first, we can do that, and then if need be, I can make an adjustment on here and change, the numbers will change. So,
Okay.
Yeah, so just the top one moved by my.
Oh, sorry.
and you got rid of it.
I got rid of it. Did you want to do the salary one first? Sorry, Councillor Long, but
Whichever, if you think.
if council wishes to do it that way, I think there was a discussion at the table that they may want to vote on that first. And then if there's a change that's needed,
Anybody have a thought on the matter?
I'm all right with doing it either way, because if, like he says, we can take the, if we don't
We'll just
approve the
readjust it.
increase, we can move it into the other one, so it would
yeah.
just be a
But
transfer.
if I do that first, I can then do that as part of the motion for the operating budget before we,
Yeah, either way would work.
What would you prefer?
we can do the salary one first and
Okay.
discuss
Okay.
it.
It is recommended that council authorize 1.4% increase to salaries and wages for the cost of living, and that this increase be made retroactively to January 1st, 2016.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Then we're good with this motion.
is recommended the council adopt the 2016 operating and maintenance budget utilizing the recommended wording of a resolution as provided. And where do we go from there?
That council approved.
And that council approve the 2016 operating and maintenance budget as detailed below with total revenues of $8,353,665.83. Total expenses of $10,310,819.10, including amortization expenses in the amount of $1,857,153.27 and an operating surplus deficit of $0, excluding the amortization expenses. Period.
And then with the revenues and expenses broken down as presented.
Herman.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
So presented, it'll be in the motion.
All those in favor?
Right?
Carried.
One down. For an operating budget. I'll take it. Sorry. I don't want to fight. Judy, you want to call?